Edward and Alphonse are two brothers who violated the most important law of alchemy to perform a human transmutation. They will have to chase a fugitive who can give them some clues, but he will lead them to a sad city that is subjected to mistreatment. There they will meet Julia, an enthusiastic young woman who is capable of giving her own life to free her people from oppression. Will they be able to convince Julia not to violate the law of alchemy? Or will Julia end up living the same suffering as the Elric brothers? Military police arrive in a city in chaos to evacuate an important family. Julia, a little girl, is confused to see everything that is happening. Her brother tries to explain the situation to her, but she sees how the military police cold-bloodedly kill the people involved in the riot in the city. Suddenly, Julia wakes up and reveals that it was all a dream in which she remembered an event from her childhood. She sees her brother beside her, who was studying an old, dusty alchemy book. He explains to Julia that someday she will understand the power of alchemy. But, while they were talking, a strange noise alerts them. He goes out to investigate, and Julia follows him quietly, unaware that she is about to experience another traumatic episode. Everyone celebrates the harvest festival happily, even Alphonse, who interrupts Edward's night's sleep. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted when they hear an explosion outside their room, so they decide to go out to investigate. A fugitive alchemist escapes from the police while destroying everything in his path, but the Elric brothers show up to stop him. They have a brief fight, but the alchemist manages to escape Edward's alchemy. The police arrive on the scene and try to arrest Edward, but he shows his state alchemist medal, and they recognize Edward instantly upon seeing his steel limbs. The next day, Colonel Roy Mustang receives a report from Riza Hawkeye, his lieutenant and right-hand man. She explains everything that happened the night before and tells him that they will meet with two witnesses to the event. When leaving the place, he sees the Elric brothers in the back seat of his car, so Riza explains to him that they are the two witnesses. The group travels to the prison that the suspect blew up and meet with one of the security guards, who explains that the fugitive alchemist's name is Melvin Voyager, a 26-year-old convict who was a few months away from serving his sentence. They then visit one of his cellmates. He explains to them that Melvin had never acted that way, and had never shown anyone his knowledge of alchemy, but that he exploded all of a sudden after biting his finger and making a transmutation circle with his blood. Then, he tells them that before he started his plan, Melvin was reading the newspaper, so they go back to the prison and start looking for clues. Edward finds a newspaper that was cut out in great detail. They compare it to another newspaper from the same day and realize that Melvin cut out the picture of Julia Crichton, a woman who entered Table City illegally. Roy asks Riza to request a report from the Table City police, and Edward is sent to the scene to investigate. The next day, the brothers board a train to their destination and dream of finding a way to retrieve their bodies. Meanwhile, two underlings from Table City explain to Roy that Melvin was an ordinary person, so they suspect that he is a perfect identity to be impersonated. Back to the Elric adventure, the brothers arrive in Table City and quickly see how strict the military control of the city is. After presenting their state alchemist medals and passing inspection without a hitch, they run to another car to help one of the officers, who is attacked by a mysterious man. The man uses alchemy to turn himself into a chimera and flees the scene. The Elrics chase the monster, but Alphonse focuses on stopping the train, while Edward confronts the chimera directly. While Edward fights the chimera, a strange paramilitary group appears and shoots at the military police. Then, a group of prisoners is released, who immediately try to catch Melvin, who was traveling undercover. The Elrics manage to stop the train before it crashes into the station and immediately run after Melvin, who escapes, destroying everything in his path. Edward sees Julia in one of the buildings and realizes that she is the girl he saw in the newspaper. He also sees her join the Black Bats, the paramilitary group that attacked the train. Melvin desperately follows the girl using alchemy to catch up with her, and although Alphonse almost saves Julia, Melvin finally manages to catch her. A tense situation engulfs Alphonse as a group of armed civilians commanded by Melvin confronts the Black Bats, who are trying to rescue Julia. But everything changes when Melvin tells Julia that he is actually Aisling Crichton, her brother. She trusts him when she sees the transmutation circles they inherited from their parents. Edward talks to the military commander of the city and asks for their help in rescuing Alphonse, but the man refuses to move his army to another city, so Edward goes in all alone in search of his brother. Winry enters Roy's office to greet him and asks him if he has any information about Edward, but while they were talking, Riza appears and explains to Roy the situation in Table City, so Roy becomes impatient. Alphonse is taken prisoner, but Julia kindly approaches him and promises to do her best to have him released quickly. She asks Alphonse to tell her about the day they violated the law of transmutation and asks if they have met the truth. Alphonse tells her the whole story and tells her that she must not do so under any circumstances, but she explains that she will do whatever it takes to gain power and lead her people out of the ruins. In addition, she tells him the story of a strange ancestral power surrounding Milos. Meanwhile, Miranda, the leader of the Black Bat group, talks to Ashley, who now serves as an ally to the town. Julia appears and explains what Alphonse has told them, but Ashley tells her that seeing the truth will bring consequences and explains everything that happened the day her parents were found dead. He murdered Melvin to steal his identity and committed a crime to spend time in prison and not be found by his parents' killers. Meanwhile, Edward is guided into the city by Pedro, a guerrilla fighter from the city. He tells him the story of Milos, the city where they live. Milos was subdued by Crete and Amstress, so their life has been reduced to misery. While they were walking, Edward meets Gonzalez, an old man who helps the war wounded by placing steel implants in them. Then, a chimera assaults Edward and murders Peter, so the young man begins to pursue the chimera. The conversation between Julia and her brother is interrupted when the chimera appears to assassinate Ashley. Alphonse and Edward join the fight and manage to defeat the chimera, but warn that many others will soon appear. At that moment, a group of chimeras appear, and the group is forced to flee through a subway river. Julia explains to the Elrics that they plan to use an ancestral power to empower their people, and they immediately relate her story to the Philosopher's Stone, the object they had long sought. But quickly Edward explains to them that the Philosopher's Stone is built from human lives and that the sacrifice is enormous. This discourages Julia, as her brother makes her understand that this is the ancestral power of which their ancestors boasted so much. The townspeople encourage her by telling her that they will all give their own lives to get the Philosopher's Stone, as they wish to leave a good legacy for their children. Edward tells them that their plan is ridiculous and leaves with Alphonse. Later, they approach Peter's funeral to say goodbye to him. The citizens of Milos worry that Edward will reach the Blood Star before they do, but Ashley reveals a transmutation circle in his body and tells them that only he knows the way there. Meanwhile, the Elrics scout around Table City for clues that will lead them to the Blood Star. Edward notices the particular layout of the city and quickly notes that it is similar to the transmutation circle they had been shown in Milos, so they enter the city and begin to descend into the subway. Meanwhile, Julia and the inhabitants of Milos prepare to attack Table City in Crete. Gonzalez gives Julia a lucky charm, so she stops hesitating and decides to give her all for the cause. The Elrics arrive at a subway city beneath Brittle City and immediately realize that this is the place where the Philosopher's Stone they were talking about in Milos was created. They then try to open a coffin and fall into a trap set by the region's commander, who explains that his plan is to use the lives of the people of Milos to create the Philosopher's Stone. The Elrics manage to free themselves using their alchemy and quickly defeat the guards. Chaos breaks out throughout the city as the people of Milos violently attack the city. Roy Mustang and Riza see the city in flames as they rush there. Ashley, Miranda, and Julia finally arrive at the Blood Star. Upon entering, Miranda asks about the strange tubes seen throughout the city, and Ashley explains to her that they are currently used to give military messages, as the commander communicated all movements by that means. But at that moment, he stabs Miranda in the back and begins to spill her blood inside the tube, while he explains to her that those tubes transport the blood towards the circle so that the transmutation can be completed. Julia watches all this in terror as she is grabbed by the arms by one of Ashley's men. That man is killed by Ashley to spill his blood into one of her tubes, and Ashley's true identity is revealed. His real name is Atlas. He was the soldier in charge of guarding the safety of Julia and her family. He was the one who killed Julia's parents when he saw the incredible research they had conducted. He also explains to her that he tore her brother's skin off. After revealing the truth, he begins to struggle with Julia to gain access to the tattoo she has on her body. When he finally succeeds, the transmutation circle is activated and the whole city begins to prepare for the ritual. Julia is no longer important to Ashley's mission, so he tries to assassinate her. But Edward arrives just in time and the two begin to fight. The blood spilled in the transmutation circle is already enough for the Philosopher's Stone to be made, so Atlas escapes to the subway to get hold of the stone. After chasing Atlas for a moment, the group separates. Alphonse decides to protect the inhabitants of the subway and Edward collaborates with Julia to catch Atlas. When Atlas was about to take the Philosopher's Stone, Edward appears and the two begin to fight violently. In the middle of the struggle, the stone falls into Julia's hands. Edward orders her to throw the stone into the lava, but her desire to save her people is so strong that she devours the stone. Her power is so great that she finishes Atlas off without any trouble. Then, they both run out of the place to help Alphonse save the people in the subway. Colonel Roy and Riza arrive on the scene and Edward quickly explains to them what is going on. Winry helps Edward with his steel prosthetic, but as he doesn't have enough spare parts, he takes her to the subway so Gonzalez can give her the necessary tools. Arriving in the center of the city, Julia and Edward try to help Alphonse stop the lava, but Atlas appears again to interrupt them. But at that moment, a strange man appears on the scene and stops Atlas. The man reveals that he is Julia's real brother, who survived the day Atlas tore his skin off thanks to a philosopher's stone their parents had saved. He smoothly kills Atlas and tries to convince Julia to destroy the whole valley, since those people treated their parents as traitors. But as Julia becomes furious with him, chaos breaks out in the place. While Edward and Ashley fight violently, Julia uses all her power to stop the lava and prevent the death of thousands of people. But as Ashley manages to take down Edward, Julia has no choice but to focus on defeating her brother. Both begin to use all their power in a single attack. But Julia uses the earring that her brother had given her when she was little and manages to defeat him. After this, the three alchemists join forces to seal the lava and create a great bridge. Julia runs to her brother and uses alchemy to heal his wounds. Although Edward and Alphonse try to stop her, Julia opens the door to the truth and sacrifices her leg to restore her brother's face. At the same time, the citizens of Milos succeed in driving out the cretins and proclaim Milos a nation again. Ashley wakes up in the hospital and is surprised to see his face again. But seeing his sister in the bed next to him, he understands everything immediately. He sees the earrings by her bedside and leaves. Then Julia wakes up and notices that there is only one earring on her table, so she understands that Ashley took the other one. She goes to say goodbye to Edward and Alphonse, wearing a prosthesis on her leg. The three of them say goodbye emotionally and the Elrics set off on a new path. In the end, Winry, Riza and Roy travel with the Elric to Amstress, leaving Milos and all the memories of the city behind. The end. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new anime recaps.